This video will show you how to find a linear regression using your TI-84 calculator. I have some data that I just made up here on the smartboard, where X represents the homework grade for students and Y represents the score on their exam. Well, I want to get a linear regression, so to do that, I'm going to use my stat function. So I'll go into stat, and I want to edit because I want to put my data in. So choose number 1 for edit. I have L1, L2, L3, etc. Now your calculator is automatically preset to understand that L1 is your independent variable and L2 is your dependent variable. So you'll want to make sure that your independent is in L1 or X and your dependent is in L2 Y. So once I'm there, I do want to show you how to clear them also. Obviously, let's just say, for instance, I had something in my list and I want to clear that list. I'm going to cursor up to where it says L1. Do not hit delete. If you hit delete, you're going to clear out the entire list and there's no list L1, and the calculator is going to try to do those calculations, but they can't find L1. So instead, we're going to cursor up to the name, we're going to press clear and enter, and your list will be cleared, but also L1 remains. So here I'm going to enter all of those homework grades. So I'm going to put 23, enter, 98, enter, 75, enter, and so forth on down to get my data entered into L1. Once I'm finishing that entering in L1 or the X values, I'm going to use my cursor keys to cursor over to L2. In L2, I'm going to put the correlating data. So for 23, I'll put 51, enter, 98, 95, and I'll continue entering down my list. Now I think I've entered something twice. If I let that be, which I did, if I let that stay there, I will have a mismatch and it would give me error mismatch. So I know I've done it, but let's go up and correct. That should be a 51, 95, 81. This should be a 65, an 89, and a 90. So now I've got this problem that I have that last one. I just have to hit my delete key and that last entry is then gone. Now that I have my data entered, second, quit, going back to my home screen. My data is still there. Well, now I want a linear regression, so I'll hit stat. A linear regression is a calculation, so I'll cursor over to calculate. I'm going to cursor down to number 4. Hit enter because that's linear regression. And here in my calculator it says L1, that's what I want, L2, and where it says, do I want it to store the linear regression? I can say yes I do, and I want it to be stored in Y1 so I could look at that graph. To make that happen, I'm going to hit vars. Those of you who still have the older operating system of this calculator, when you hit enter after you went to linear regression, you have a different screen. And at the top of your screen it says linear regression L1, L2. At that point, you can also ask for it to look on the graph. You would be typing a comma. A comma is right here, and then you're going to do the exact same buttons that we're working on. We're going to tell it Y1. So I'm going to hit vars. I'm going to cursor over to yvars. I'm going to do number 1 because it is a function, and I want to put it in Y1. I'll cursor down. I cursor down to press calculate. The rest of you who have the other calculator, you just press enter. Well, now I have my linear regression. I'll pull that over. My linear regression in the form of course, mx plus b or ax plus b. Statistics uses a. I have 0.607x plus 34.7. If I go to my y equals menu, I'll see that is there. I'm going to go clear out too. That was from an old problem. But I find that whole linear regression has already put in to the y equals for me, and I see that regression. Now we have to set our window a little bit because my x's are running from 23 all the way up to 98. My y's are, 51 and up to 95. So my window here, we'll just set it for scores of a test from 0 to 100. That sometimes you get extra credit. And the scale being 10. And again, my y min being 0 and my y max being 100. And again, we can set that as a scale of 10. And take a look at what it looks like on the graph. And you're going to see that line, and we also call that the regression line, the least squares line, the best fit line. What I'd also like you to be able to see is that these individual points can be plotted by your calculator. To do that, go back to y equals, cursor up to plot 1, hit enter, cursor back down, and now you'll see that stays highlighted. That means that anything in L1, L2, etc. will be plotted. So when I go back to my graph, you'll see those actual lines. You'll see the best fit line, least squares line. You'll see that plotted, and you'll see that that's a pretty good correlation there. And I now have made my linear regression based upon my data.